Welcome to another episode of the GayBarchives Show, where we explore gay history, one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and our guest today is the Larry King of drag queens, Amber LeMay. So welcome to the show, Amber.
Well, thank you, Art. It's nice to see you.
Likewise, it's great to have you on here and to learn about some bars in some places that we have not spoken about.
Ooh.
So you've had a fairly long history doing drag, coming up on 30 years now.
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot of drag.
That's a lot of snagged hose. That's what that
is. So one of the bars that you mentioned you wanted to speak about, I have never heard of. I've researched over 2,000 gay bars that used to exist around the country, and Baker's Bar in Ohio is not one I've ever heard of, and that's Lima, Ohio, right? Not Lima,
yes.
It's Lima.
Yes, it is Lima, just like it was on Glee. It's not the same as it was portrayed on Glee.
Just like the bean, the Lima bean.
Yes.
So tell me about Baker's Bar. What was that like?
Well, that was the first gay bar that I went to, and it was in downtown Lima, which wasn't a very pleasant place to go to. And it was this old towny bar, and evidently the gays had taken it over. And what I really liked was it was a big horseshoe-shaped bar. And so you could really look around and do some cruising if you'd like. And I don't know how long it had been there, but shortly after I started going there, the other bar opened up, and then Baker's closed shortly afterwards.
So what year was it that you first went there?
That was probably 1980, 81.
Okay. And how big of a bar was this, do you think?
Oh, we probably held 75 people. I mean, it was a good sized bar. Like it was very narrow with a big horseshoe bar in the middle, but a lot of people could get in there.
Was it designed more as kind of a neighborhood type bar, a cruising bar, or did they also have like a dance floor or performance stage or anything?
No, it was strictly a bar. You know, it was I don't know what its original intention was, and I don't know when the gays took over it, but it was in the community for quite a few years.
Okay. And where was this located in Lima? You said downtown?
Right in the town square. The building is no longer there, but it was right in the middle of town square.
Yeah, that happens to so many of our gay bars. The buildings are gone, the bars are gone. It's all been erased from history. So what was your experience like when you walked in there? You said that was the first gay bar you had walked into. What was that like to you inside? Was it a sigh of relief that, wow, I have a community and people to associate with? Or was it like, oh my goodness, this is scary?
All what you said. Yes. It was really interesting. I was involved in a community theater there in Lima, and we were doing a production of Sly Fox, and there were several gays in the cast. And after one of the rehearsals, I think they said, "Okay, Bob, you're coming with us." And I go, "Where?" And they go, and I knew where they were going. And they said, "Baker's." I go, "No, that's okay. You guys go have some fun." And they said, "No, Bob, it's time. You need to go to Baker's." And so they took me there, and it was right around Halloween. And so there was costumes there, and it was something I had really never seen before. And I was very grateful for those guys for wanting to do that for me by pulling me out of the closet like that.
Out of the closet and into the bar.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that a few years after your experience going there, that a new bar in town opened. Yes. Was that bar somewhere in time?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Tom Ritchie, who he grew up in Lima and then moved to Houston to go to college. He'd come back to Lima to sell his house. I don't know if it was his house or his family house, but he came back and he went to Baker's, and he goes, "Lima deserves better than this." And so but it was what was it? It was called the Saints and Sinners Bar on North Street that he bought and turned into Somewhere in Time When Even the Moon Is Not Enough. That's the full title of the bar.
Wow. Now, Saints and Sinners at that location was not a gay bar, correct?
No, it was a motorcycle bar.
Oh,
And yes, Lima had a lot of motorcycle, I don't know if gangs or groups, I guess it would be called, but that was their hangout. And I guess that wasn't doing too good. And the owner said, "Hey, yeah, we'll take your money." And so it turned it into Somewhere in Time.
so that's an interesting transition. Did that, to your knowledge, did that cause any difficulty when the gay bar opened? Were there still stragglers that, maybe were from out of town visitors that would go to the Saints and Sinners that stumbled in and go, "Wait a minute, this isn't,
No, I always found that the bikers were very friendly and open because they were considered outcasts of the community as well. So, sort of like birds of a feather. It's that they're very accepting and forgiving.
So in the beginning, you would still get bikers that would come in and belly up to the bar and have a beer.
They'd come in and they might have a drink or two. I know some of them stayed because they didn't mind the new clientele at all. In fact, they found it rather welcoming.
So compared to Baker's, Somewhere in Time, was it a much bigger bar? Did it have more amenities than Baker's did? What was it like?
Yes. Well, there was two rooms to Somewhere in Time. There was the main lounge, which had a low bar with comfy rolly seats and a pool table, and that was mainly for open during the week for just meeting and having drinks. And then you opened the double doors and it went into Valhalla. That was the dance club of the place that had a stage and another bar in it.
So they had a separate name for the dance club portion?
Of course.
I happen to know from my research that Somewhere in Time originally opened in 1982.
Yes.
And except for a apparently slight blip during the COVID crisis, they will be celebrating this year their 40th anniversary. They're still open.
Yeah. They were closed for a short time because Tom thought he wanted to retire, and I think he sold it to his nephew. And there was a little change there, but I guess it is going to be opening up again soon. So yeah, it stayed open for, like you said, 38 years. I mean, how many gay bars in a small town such as Lima? Because Lima, back in the 80s, it probably had 47,000 people. But towards the end, now it's down to 40,000, if that many. I always like to describe Lima as being in that great gay triangle of Toledo, Dayton, and Fort Wayne.
And it's just trapped in the middle there somewhere.
Yes. LIMA sometimes stands for Lost in Middle America.
And so once you discovered Somewhere in Time and started becoming a regular customer there, and of course by this time you said Baker's kind of dwindled and closed.
Yes.
Is that when you discovered your drag persona? Is that when Bob became Amber and started performing on stage?
No, that didn't happen until I moved to Vermont. And back in 1988, I moved to Vermont, and Amber made her first appearance in, I think 1991 or 2. Yes.
So you were a little bit.
It's almost 30 years. Oh my God.
I know, crazy how time flies.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's funny because one of my other favorite interviews that I've done, and you, by the way, are interview number 99.
Wow.
In the past year and a half, I've done now 99 interviews with people about their memories of gay bars from all over the country. And one of my other favorites is also from Ohio. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but there was a gentleman by the name of Todd Stevens who wrote a movie called Edge of 17. That was a coming out movie about a teenager in Sandusky, Ohio. And in his movies about this kid's coming out and experiencing life, there is a bar that makes an appearance called the Universal Fruit and Nut Company. And in the course of interviewing Todd, I discovered that that bar did in fact exist in Sandusky, Ohio. It was actually a bar called the Universal Fruit and Nut Company. And it was right across from the amusement park, right across from the entrance to the amusement park.
Cedar Point, yeah.
But I knew nothing about it, never heard about it. And it's always interesting to me to find stories like you talking about Baker's Bar or Somewhere in Time, especially because they're still around. I mean,
Yes.
that is just remarkable to me. When you were growing up, you grew up in Lima, correct?
Outside of Lima, yes.
So at that time, did you think of that as being a very liberal, open-minded place, or was it more of a conservative middle America?
Oh, a very, very conservative. Like right now, the representative, the congressman from the Lima area is Jim Jordan. Does that say something?
Yes, it does.
So that's how it was, and that's one of the reasons I moved to Vermont. Was I just felt I don't know how happy I can be here. You know, how much I can be me if I stay in Lima. And I was very fortunate that some friends of mine, well, unfortunate for them, they got laid off from the Westinghouse plant in Lima because it was in the mid to late 80s when everything was shutting down. All the factories were shutting down, and it became the Rust Belt. And the husband of the family got a job in Vermont. And when they went to move, I drove one of their cars up from Lima to Vermont. And that's the farthest I had ever been away from Lima. And I was in my early 30s. And the minute I walked down Church Street in Burlington, I said, I want to live here. There was just something about the electricity or something sparked me. And I said, I want to live here. And I moved here 2 years later.
What time of year was that?
I moved. Let's see, I moved in late August. My first visit was April 1st of
Oh, so
85.
spring. It was springtime in Vermont when you first experienced it.
Yeah, well, we left Lima at the end of March, and it was spring with green grass and buds on the trees. We got to Vermont, and there were several inches of snow on the ground. But I still loved it.
So you moved to Burlington, which I assume is a substantially larger metropolitan area than Lima.
Yes, Burlington itself, I think, is a little under 40,000, but because it's right up against the lake, it really can't grow that much. So the surrounding area is like 150,000, I believe, 125 to 150,000 people in the metropolitan area.
And from what I understand, is of course the nature there is beautiful. It was, green. The name Vermont anyway comes from the words that mean green mountain, but it was a very invigorating experience just from what the nature had to offer there.
Oh, definitely. I don't know if it's Burlington sits right on Lake Champlain, and which sometimes people call the seventh Great Lake, and across the lake is the Adirondack Mountains, where the sun sets every night, and then the sun comes up over the Green Mountains right behind us, and it's just a beautiful place to be. I'm doing this interview while I'm in Provincetown for a weekly or a yearly trip to Provincetown, and driving out of Vermont, we just said, oh, we're going to miss Vermont because it is so pretty, and we really hate to leave sometimes in the summer because it is so pretty, but Provincetown ain't so bad itself.
So you moved to Vermont roughly 30 years ago.
Yes.
No more than 30 years ago. And you are still living in Vermont.
Yes.
So that in itself is a testament to what the area is like. What was the environment like in the city in Burlington compared to what you were used to in Lima?
Well, for one thing, Bernie Sanders was mayor of Burlington when I moved here, so that says a lot right there. And he was really working hard with the Progressive Party to make Burlington more socially aware and caring. And he did a lot to revitalize parts of Burlington, and did a lot of community action. And so that helped make it a better place to live. Burlington is a college town, and that helps. And then also, IBM had one of their largest plants right outside of Burlington, and that brought in a lot of money to the area, and also a lot of culture too, because to maintain that. To maintain their employees, they had to make sure it was a nice place to live.
So you get there, you discover Burlington, and you obviously decide you're going to explore their gay nightlife options.
Yes.
And you discovered a bar there that was known as Pearls.
Yes.
What was your first impression of Pearls?
Oh, it was. I walked in, and there was a second floor and a first floor. And the second floor was open during the week, and it was big, wide wood planks on the wall, and it just looked like a Vermont lodge. I said, this is a bar in Vermont. And there was just wood, old wood. It was an old building, and it was just very friendly. And since it was the only gay bar in town, there was a mixture of gay men and lesbians. And that was pretty nice, because we had to talk to each other. Whether it be playing pool or just getting a drink, we talked to each other, and I think it really helped form the community.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of people don't realize about what the old gay bars were like for the community. What kind of impact they had, because it was at a time when you didn't have other ways of communicating with gay people, really. And a lot of other environments, whether it was in public, at the mall or the restaurant, or at work or at home, you couldn't discuss those things. You couldn't talk about them. And so that was your only place that you could be who you were and talk about things that were of concern to you as a gay person.
And to meet other gay people.
Oh, absolutely.
That's being new in town. I didn't know anybody gay. And so I'd go there, and it was a little hard to start conversations. But I found that playing pool was the best way to meet people, because again, you have to talk, while you're waiting around for your shot or your game, you start conversations. And that's how I met a lot of good people. And there was also a Sunday night volleyball league that I joined right away, and I met some people there, and this was I'm still friends with.
So this was in the late 80s when you were kind of exploring Pearls.
Yes.
Now, compared to Somewhere in Time, what was Pearls like? Was it a bigger bar, about the same size?
It was probably, the upstairs was smaller than the lounge at Somewhere. But the lower level was probably bigger than the dance floor at Somewhere. And it had a little better stage than Somewhere did.
And so apparently that little better stage lured you into the spotlight after a couple of years. And Amber May kind of popped out of the woods in Vermont and made her debut on the stage at Pearls.
Well, actually, there was a social group called Vermont Gay Social Alternatives that someone formed for people who didn't feel comfortable going to a bar. So they had social events at people's houses, or we go out to dinner and do events like that. And they were having a New Year's Eve party. And I was on the organizing committee of the party. And so I said, I got some entertainment I think you might like. Because my friend Mike Hayes and I had talked about forming a drag act, because we loved performing, and we had done some as Bob and Mike, but that just didn't take off. People weren't crazy to see Bob and Mike, but there were a couple other drag queens in town at the time, Yolanda and Tart, and they were very successful. They were both very different types of drag queens. Yolanda was more the gospel singing fairy type of drag queen, whereas Tart was more of the more camp, bad singing, bad joke type of drag queen. And the audiences really liked both of them. And so Mike looked at me and said, we can do that. And so that's how we started our drag act. And we called ourselves Amber and Marguerite, the sisters LeMay. And we would sing our own songs, or we would sing songs, we would tell jokes. And that first night, we performed with our friend Cindy Zook and our accompanist Craig Hilliard, who both still perform with us to this day, some 30 years later. And we had so much fun doing it, and people liked what we did. And several of our friends came up and said, "Hey, you're having so much fun. Can we have some fun with you?" And so that's what we did. We said, sure, you come up, you create a character, and you can be a part of us. And that was when we created our backstory, that the Sisters LeMay were from the Hot Dam Trailer Park in Beaver Pond, Vermont. And so we created this whole village in the rural part of Vermont, and that we called Beaver Pond. And so all of us, I said, every character has to have a backstory about Beaver Pond. And that's what we did. And so we would do shows with skits in them. Every fall, we would do a show called the Leaf Peeping Cider Sipping Review that would concentrate on tourists and politics. And then we always do a Christmas show. And then in the spring, we would do the Leaf Peeping Sap Tapping, no, Mud Flapping Sap Tapping Review, where we'd talk about surviving winter and other things that was in the news. We always tried to be current. We always had a little political edge or commentary to what we did.
So speaking of sap tapping, did Amber learn how to tap maple trees?
No, there's a joke in there about Amber being tapped, but I have never tapped a tree.
So you don't actually know how to.
I've seen it done. I've seen it done. I just never physically done it myself.
Well, you might break a nail anyway, so
that's right.
We can't be having that.
No.
So when you first went to Pearls, how long were they an established bar at that time, or are they fairly new?
They had opened up in 1982, the same year as Somewhere in Time.
Okay. And my understanding is that they were open until not too long ago. I mean, they lasted quite a long time too, didn't they?
I think, let's see, what year is today?
22.
22.
I'm thinking 2016, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
So they lasted a good long time too. They lasted almost 35 years.
Yes.
Which was pretty cool. Now, was the original Pearls at the 135 Pearl location?
Yes. And that was the address, 135 Pearl Street.
Right.
And but they just called it Pearls, plural, not possessive. And then when the new owner took over, he changed the name to 135 Pearl.
Some of their old ads were kind of cute, the way they played on the word, and everyone loves pearls, and they have a strand of pearls in their ad from, like, I don't know, the early 80s. It was kind of interesting, different than what I've been more around gay bars in bigger cities like New York and Chicago and Atlanta and Fort Lauderdale, and they tend to go with kind of racier ads, a lot of times using silhouettes of male torsos and sexual innuendo and stuff like that. And so it's kind of interesting to see these ads from Pearls that were much more kind of warm and fuzzy, kind of small town grandma hugs ads. They played on a completely different direction. I think that probably speaks to the nature of the bars too, but.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And also, you were talking about those ads in the other publications or from the bigger cities, and those were probably in major gay publications, whereas the ads from Pearls and stuff were not focused exactly on a gay audience, but were out there for a broader appeal.
Now, did Pearls or 135 Pearl, either incarnation, did it attract a mixed clientele where there are straight people that showed up there on a regular basis and women, as opposed to just being a men's bar?
Um, well, like I said, the lesbians were a very prominent part of the Pearls community. The first Friday of every month was the women's dance, and so during the week it was mainly older gay males there, but on the weekends it was maybe 60-40 men to women. And as far as straight people, there were some straight people came in because there's a lot of restaurants in Burlington. So the restaurant crowd would bring in their friends. And but we didn't have that many like bachelorette parties coming in like there's a problem in some cities.
I don't think anybody did back then. I think that's a
Yeah.
more recent phenomenon, unfortunately.
Mhm.
But a lot of the stories that I've heard from smaller town bars, they were very mixed because they were the only game in town. So if
Yeah.
you were a lesbian and there was a bar that was intended to be a men's bar, gay men's bar, you were probably going to stumble in there because your other choice was going to go to the straight bar. So, eventually, I think a lot of the small towns that only have one bar, they do end up being more mixed. By the time that Pearls had closed, well, by that time it was called 135 Pearl.
Yes.
By the time it closed around 2016 or so, were there other gay bars in Burlington?
There were a few who tried. There was one. The address was 135 St. Paul Street. I forget even what the name of it was. It wasn't open more than 6 months or so. And, every once in a while, someone will say, oh, we're going to be the new gay bar. And they'd open up and it just didn't work out. That they just wanted to not be a part of the gay community. They wanted to take advantage of the gay community. So they didn't last long at all. So it was 5 years ago, someone tried to open a bar in Winooski, Vermont, and they named it Mr. Sister. And there were members of the community and that took offense to that name. And the poor guy just got harassed by members of the community and it more or less ran him out of business. And it was too bad.
Yeah, I have heard the story about that bar. And there was also some talk about the fact that he really didn't want to open a gay bar, that he just did it as a gimmick to get some attention. I don't know, because I don't know the owner of the bar or what.
Right.
Did you ever
go
there?
Oh, yes. I supported it. I hosted bingo there many times. Well, he did have, it was just a regular bar at first, but then, maybe he did decide there's a market for the gay crowd and changed it into a gay bar. And that's when he chose the name Mr. Sister. And he thought it was funny. He said he used to call himself Mr. Sister, and he saw no offense in it. And it was just a very there's just a radical segment of our community who just wants to pick apart every little thing. And that it was really sad because it wasn't just local people condemning him. He had people from all over the world, writing bad things, saying they were never going to go there. Well, they weren't anyway, that's so it was pretty sad. And I was sorry to see that close.
Yeah, that guy in Manchester, England, that was complaining about it probably wasn't making a special trip to Vermont to go to Mr. Sister anyway.
Right. It was a very the activist trans community really had the effect.
Yeah, I've seen the articles about that, and that they were making fun of trans people and blah blah blah. But I've noticed a lot of people now. There's so much sensitivity in the community. I'm almost afraid to say anything sometimes because you're.
Oh, really? Trying to have a weekly talk show.
Because, so many people in the community get offended by the slightest little things. And I remember when I first came out, my first gay bar experience was in the late 70s. And when I went out the first time, everything was gay. If you were a drag queen, you were gay. If you were a lesbian, you were gay. If you were a male sleeping with other men, you were gay. There was no
No.
LGBTQIAPR, blah, blah, blah. It was all gay. And even though there were segmented groups within there, the leather community didn't necessarily hang out with the lesbians on a nightly basis or whatever. Everybody seemed to get along pretty well. And when you look back at the early pride marches and some of the early bars, the bigger bars especially, you see that it was a big community and nobody was offended. But now it's like you say the wrong thing, suddenly everybody is wanting to sue everybody. Well, you called me she, and I'm like,
I had an interview with Tracy Bayham a couple of weeks ago. Tracy was one of the founders of the Windy City Times
yes,
out of Chicago, and I think she's now the publisher of the Chicago Weekly, or Chicago
Reader.
Yes, and she covered the gay events, since the 70s, and she had great pictures, great stories, and she always talked about the gay community. And that's how she mentioned it. And then later on in the interview, she said LGBTQ. And I stopped her. I said, okay, Tracy, when did it go from gay to LGBTQ? And why is the L first? That's
right, because originally it was gay, and then it was gay and lesbian. Yes. And then it was gay, lesbian, and bi.
Yes.
But the G was always first. I'm thinking it was probably late 90s-ish when it reverted to the LGBT. Not sure why.
I don't either. Who made that decision? Who was on that committee?
It was probably a lesbian.
I'll let you say that.
But yeah, Tracy's great. She's done a great job for the community. Her publications, her books. Yeah. I've interviewed several people recently who are authors from Chicago.
I have too, yes.
Have worked with her. I recently interviewed Rick Carlin, Owen Keenan. And
I've talked to Owen several times, yes.
Owen is great. And Saint Suki Delacroix. And Ian Hensel, who Ian is owns a publishing company called Rattling Good Yarns. And Rattling Good Yarns basically is a publishing company that puts out books that represent the underrepresented gay voices. So they're not books about Oscar Wilde. That's not what they're trying to publish. They're publishing a little bit more underground and, segmented stories. They have a book coming out next month in September of this year called Last Call Chicago, which catalogs 1001 gay bars and venues that existed in Chicago in the last century.
Oh my gosh.
And that's written by Saint Suki Delacroix and Rick Carlin. But Tracy has written some books with some of those authors too. And they have some great books out there. And you just have to appreciate the fact that they're, not stepping away from their journalistic career and their memories and background and actually helping preserve our history, which is, so easily lost. So
especially to people who don't care, the younger people, they had it so easy, they just glide through life, whereas we had to fight for things and be fought, and made it possible for what they're doing now. And some people just don't appreciate the effort that was made, and they don't want to learn.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing this series. That's why I'm inviting people like you who have had experiences with bars in different places and memories of these places, so that we can preserve them and people can learn about them, because there is not some big Encyclopedia Britannica somewhere that you can find all this information. So much of it is tucked away in corners. There may be a Burlington, Vermont, historical society that has a box in a corner somewhere with this information, but I am not going to Burlington, Vermont looking for that information. And so many other people aren't. So I'm trying to bring out the stories, and I don't personally care whether the person I'm interviewing is an international celebrity or owned 50 bars or was the guy that did lighting at the bar or whatever, was a bartender, because everybody in our community has a story to tell about the first bar they went to, their favorite bar in their hometown, or the first place they moved as an adult. And that's the only way to capture them, is by talking to people who actually experience them.
Well, I think it's fascinating what you do, because it's always curious. There's a couple buildings in Burlington where someone have told me, oh, that used to be a gay bar back in the 60s or 50s. And I wasn't around then, so I really don't know. One was called the Hi-Hat Club, and it's in the building where Nectar's is now. And Nectar's is the bar where Fish got their start, and they were students at the University of Vermont. And I'm trying to think what the name of the bar was on Center Street. And maybe that'll come to me. But if I think of it later on, I'll email that to you.
Excellent. So you've been doing drag for some 30 years now.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you're in Provincetown right now.
Yes.
Another city that is rich with gay history. Especially,
it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
I'm not sure there's any straight history there. But yeah, another guy that I'm going to be interviewing soon is actually there in Provincetown. He's a DJ at the Crown and Anchor. His name is Tom Yaz. And he does a show a couple nights a week, I think, there at the Crown and Anchor. So what brings you to Provincetown? Are you performing there?
Well, we do. We assist Miss Richfield 1981. She hosts a drag brunch on the Friday of Carnival Week. This is Carnival Week, which is the biggest week of the summer here on the Cape, or in Provincetown. And my friends have been coming down here for over 20 years, and I've just been coming down for the last 10. But we help Miss Richfield, and during her drag brunch, we mainly go around selling raffle tickets and being her assistants. But we would get up and sing as well every once in a while. But that's how we do it. And I said we've been doing that for 10 years now. And so we've become a little, I wouldn't say famous, but people do recognize us since we've been coming back year after year. And like later on today, I'm going to just go out on the street and do some video recording, and having some pictures shot. And it's just a fun place to be. And
of course, we know that you also, and I mentioned this in the introduction, but you're known as the Larry King of drag queens.
Yes. That's what I've been called.
Maybe we should explain that a little bit. A lot of people may not know you have a blog that you do, or an interview show that you do every week, correct?
That's right. We've done 117 episodes. That's a weekly, every Sunday night it airs. It was back in when COVID started, the big shutdown. Burlington shut down on March 16th, 2020. On March 22nd, I contacted my friend Russell Dreher down in New York, and I said, I'm bored. I said, I got to do something. I noticed people are doing some live things on Facebook. How do I go about that? And he gave me some instructions. And so that night, I started what I called Ask a Drag Queen. And it was just me sitting in my living room, dressed up with my laptop on my lap, which was evident because it kept bouncing up and down with poor lighting. But I just talked for an hour, and people would send me messages and ask me questions, and we would chat. And so that happened for like three, maybe 4 weeks. And then Russell said, I think we got something here. I think we can do a little bit more. And so we started inviting guests on. And the guests were local people in Burlington, bar owners, business owners, performers, and finding out what are they doing, during COVID. How are they surviving? How are they coping? And do they have any tricks for anybody else? And then Russell has lived in Astoria, New York, for a long time, and so he had a lot of connections on the fringes of the entertainment community there. And so we started talking to them, and it just grew. And so, like I said, we've now had 117 episodes. And if you count the number of Sundays since March 22nd, 2020, there's not many more than 117. So we've been at it, and we just keep pumping out the material.
I can feel your pain. I have done some weeks I've done 2 or 3 interviews, but it's kind of slowed down a little bit. But I've done, as I said earlier, you're the 99th, and it can take a lot out of you. People don't realize how much work it is. These people are not lined up at my door like they are, at the deli counter at the grocery store, waiting to get on the show. It takes a lot of research and outreach and emailing back and forth and setting up a time that works for everybody and, getting it all done. But in the end, I think it's a really important thing that we get to document this. And fortunately for both of us, COVID did have a silver lining in that some of these streaming options for interviews have just exploded. And there are so many ways that we can actually do that. We can connect from 100 or 1,000 or several thousand miles away and be able to do these things easily, which a couple of years ago would have been quite a challenge.
Exactly. I mean, we've had interviews with people in Australia, Japan, several from England, and all over the United States. And during COVID, other people were bored too. They said, "Sure, if I don't have to leave my house, I'll talk to you." And so that was very helpful as well. And people ask me, "Well, COVID's over. Are you going to keep doing your show?" And I said, "Yeah, I am, because I really enjoy it, and I find it interesting." And I've reached a community or developed a community on Amber Live that is pretty interesting as well, because we started on Wednesdays doing Amber Chat. And that's just an hour of me getting on there with Russell, the producer, and we just talk. And if someone else wants to come on, we send them the link and they can come on. And we talk about what we had for dinner, what new TV shows are we watching? What's the weather like? Anything that people want to talk about, we'll talk about. And we've got people, again, from all over the world who check in and make comments. And I see on Facebook that they've become friends, and they converse back and forth, and that wouldn't be possible if we didn't do what we did. So that's pretty gratifying that we've reached out and created that type of community.
I agree, because I have done interviews with people I probably never would have met. Some people that I have known casually for decades, but haven't really kept in touch with. I did one interview with Larry T, who was one of the guys that was with RuPaul and Lahoma when they moved to New York.
Oh my!
Atlanta. I knew Larry from Atlanta 30 odd years ago, and when I did his interview, he was in Berlin. So, it's just kind of nice to connect and hear those stories again. But it's definitely made it easier for us to do this and to record all of these stories with all these people. Now, your show, if somebody wants to find out more about the Sunday show or the Wednesday show, they can go to amberlive.tv.
Yes, that will get you right there. It'll make connections. It'll take you to our YouTube page. Our YouTube page has over 700 clips, and has every full episode, but then it has a lot of clips of just the individual interviews, and also some comedy bits that we do in the show, some musical bits, and other things that we've created that aren't on the show. We also are on TikTok and Instagram, and we have a lot of fun things up there too.
Excellent. So besides your online chat programs and occasionally working a drag brunch in Provincetown, what else are you up to these days?
Well, for the past 20 years, the House of LeMay has hosted the Winter is a Drag Ball, and that's the winter's biggest party in the Burlington area. We've raised literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for the local AIDS charities. And it's held at the Higher Ground nightclub, which has one room that holds 700 people. The other room holds 300 people. And we're the only event of the year where you can buy one ticket and go back and forth to the rooms. And I've got entertainment for 5-6 hours on both stages with DJs, up to 100 performers performing in the night. And that's the main thing we do. We haven't been doing that much live performing. We make appearances, like Lucy Bell and I every year help the Vermont City Marathon. We stand on the corner of Cherry and Church Street in direct traffic in drag. We're there at 6:45 in the morning in full makeup, and we direct the runners that are coming down the corner or around the corner. And since we've done it for over 10 years, runners will stop and get a picture taken with us, or there's always high fives. And when we're out during the year, many of the runners will come up to us and say, "You have no idea what you mean to us when we see you at that corner. It just inspires us." I think it just makes them want to run faster myself, but they really like us. And another reason why we haven't been performing that much is that Marguerite, my drag sister, Mike Hayes, experienced a stroke 3 years ago. And so Mike's unable to perform right now. And so I feel a little hesitant about doing a full-time show without his participation, because he's been so much a part of the House of LeMay literally from the beginning. And so I feel a little, like I said, hesitant about doing something without him. But we're going to figure out a way to involve him.
Well, I am sure you will come up with something. So people that are interested, can they find out about the Winter is a Drag Ball at amberlive.tv also? Is that information on there, or they go elsewhere for that?
We've set the date for next year. It's February 18th. And we don't have anything up yet, but we will soon.
Okay, excellent. Well, Amber, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your bar memories from Lima, Ohio, and Burlington, Vermont, and telling us about some of your drag history and what you're doing up there in P-Town right now. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Art. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to talking to you again.
You certainly will.
That concludes another episode of the GayBarchives Show. For more information about this episode, or to find more episodes, visit GayBarchives.com.